The metallic clang of the padlock falling to the concrete floor echoed through the interior of the huge red barn. Emma Grant, 28, held the old brass key tightly while her sister Rachel, 2 years younger, pushed open the heavy wooden doors. The creak of rusty hinges broke decades of silence on the rural estate in Millbrook, Virginia. "I can't believe we're finally going to find out what Grandpa kept in here all those years," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling slightly with a mixture of anxiety and apprehension. The two sisters had grown up hearing stories about the mysterious barn that their grandfather Jackson Grant fiercely protected. The evening light seeped through the gaps between the boards, creating golden beams that cut through the darkness. Emma groped the wall near the entrance, looking for the switch that should have been there according to the instructions left in her grandfather's will. When her fingers found the small metal device, she hesitated for a moment. "Are you ready?" she asked her sister, who nodded silently. With a click, dozens of industrial lamps suspended from the barn's high ceiling lit up in sequence, revealing something that took both sisters' breath away. Lined up in perfectly organized rows were more than 30 classic vehicles, their paintwork still glistening under the layer of accumulated dust. "Oh my God!" Rachel put her hands to her mouth, her eyes tracing the contours of a red and white 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air. "That's a fortune," Emma added, still stunned by the discovery. She began to walk slowly among the vehicles, recognizing models she had only seen in specialist magazines: a 1965 Ford Mustang, a 1953 Packard Caribbean, a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda. The family's lawyer, Martin Wheeler, who was accompanying them at a respectful distance, finally spoke up. "Your grandfather started this collection over 50 years ago. From what he told me, each car has a unique history." The sisters continued to explore the space, discovering not only cars, but also meticulously organized documents, old photographs and diaries detailing the history of each vehicle. On a work table at the back of the barn, they found a letter addressed to them, handwritten by Jackson. Emma opened the envelope carefully and began to read aloud. "My dear granddaughters, if you are reading this letter, it means that the time has finally come for me to share my life's work with you. Each vehicle in this barn represents not only a financial investment, but a part of American history that I have dedicated myself to preserving. I know that many considered me eccentric, perhaps even paranoid, for keeping this place so protected. But I always knew I had to make sure this legacy got into the right hands, and you, my girls, have always been the natural choice. Emma, your passion for mechanics even as a child reminded me so much of myself. And Rachel, your eye for business and your determination gave me the certainty that together you will know exactly what to do with this collection. Love, Grandpa Jackson." Rachel wiped away a tear as Emma carefully folded the letter. The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Frank Morrison, the caretaker who had worked for Jackson for 3 decades, appeared at the entrance to the barn. "He spent the last few months organizing all this for you," said Frank, coming closer. "Every document, every maintenance record. He wanted to make sure you had all the information you needed." The sisters exchanged meaningful glances. The Grant farm, with its 200 acres of fertile land, was already a considerable inheritance, but the financial challenges of maintaining it were constant. This collection changed the picture completely. "There's something else you need to see," Frank continued, guiding them to a small office on the mezzanine of the barn. There they found a modern computer connected to several screens, showing images from the security cameras strategically placed around the barn. "Your grandfather has modernized the entire security system in recent years," explained Frank. "Alarms, motion sensors, cameras with night vision. He knew the value of what he was protecting." Emma sat back in the worn leather chair, absorbing the complexity of the system her grandfather had implemented. Rachel, meanwhile, was already leafing through a detailed catalog of the collection, her eyes glazing over as she saw the estimated value of each vehicle. "We need to think carefully about what to do," Emma said at last. "Some of these cars are museum pieces, others could be sold to ensure the upkeep of the farm. And others," Rachel added, "need to stay in the family just as Grandpa wanted." As the sun set over the Virginia horizon, the Grant sisters began to understand the true extent of the legacy they had received. It wasn't just a collection of vintage cars, but a testament to their grandfather's love of history preservation, and above all, his family. Wheeler snorted softly, drawing the sisters' attention. "There are still some legal details we need to discuss. Your grandfather left specific instructions on how to proceed with the collection." The sisters nodded, knowing that important decisions and significant challenges lay ahead. But at that moment, surrounded by Jackson Grant's automotive treasures, they felt closer to their grandfather than ever, ready to honor his legacy in the way he had always dreamed. Martin Wheeler's office was located in a historic building in downtown Millbrook. Emma and Rachel were sitting in front of his mahogany desk, while the lawyer rummaged through a worn leather briefcase that had belonged to Jackson Grant. "Your grandfather left very specific instructions on how to proceed with the collection," said Wheeler, adjusting his thin-rimmed glasses. "There's a list of vehicles that he classified as untouchables, those that have special meaning to the family." Rachel picked up the list that Wheeler had slid across the table. Her eyes ran over the models annotated in her grandfather's precise handwriting: a navy blue 1969 Pontiac GTO. The first car he restored, a champagne-colored 1959 Cadillac Eldorado, in which he drove Grandma Marie down the aisle, and a cherry-red 1957 Ford Thunderbird, which he had bought on the day his father, Richard Grant, was born. "There's one more thing," Wheeler continued, pulling out a USB stick from his briefcase. "Jackson recorded a video for you a few weeks before he passed away. He wanted you to watch it after you discovered the collection." Emma connected the device to the laptop Wheeler offered. The screen showed an image of her grandfather sitting in his favorite chair in the farm library. Despite the illness that was consuming him, his blue eyes still shone with the same intensity that his granddaughters remembered. "My dears," Jackson began, his voice hoarse but firm, "if you're watching this video, you already know my little treasure. But there's something I have to confess: the collection isn't just about the cars. Each vehicle tells a story about our family, and some of them have yet to be revealed." The sisters exchanged puzzled glances as Jackson continued. "In the secret compartment under the driver's seat of the Pontiac GTO, you'll find a diary. It belonged to your grandmother Marie and contains the true story of how we met. It wasn't at a dance in town as we always told." Rachel covered her mouth with her hands in surprise. Emma leaned forward, absorbing every word. "Marie was a talented mechanic at a time when women weren't welcome in that profession," Jackson revealed. "She worked undercover in her father's workshop using her dead brother's name. It was she who taught me everything I know about cars." The video continued with Jackson revealing that each vehicle in the collection held a secret Grant family story. The Packard Caribbean hid love letters exchanged between his parents during the Second World War. The Plymouth Barracuda contained documents about family land that had been lost during the Great Depression. After the video finished, Emma and Rachel remained silent for a few moments, processing the revelations. "There's one more thing," said Wheeler, pulling out a sealed envelope. "Instructions about a safe installed in the floor of the barn. Jackson mentioned that it contains something that could completely change your understanding of the Grant family history." Back in the barn, Frank Morrison helped the sisters locate the safe, cleverly camouflaged under a metal plate. Emma entered the combination provided by Wheeler, and the mechanism opened with a soft click. Inside, they found an old folder containing documents yellowed by time. The first was a deed dated 1923, revealing that the Grant farmland had originally belonged to a Native American family. Jackson's grandfather had acquired the property under questionable circumstances during a period of territorial conflict. "He spent years trying to trace the descendants of this family," explained Frank, who knew part of the story. "He wanted to do things the right way. That's why he was so insistent on preserving not just the cars but the whole story." Emma murmured, finally understanding the true extent of her grandfather's legacy. Rachel found a list of names and addresses with Jackson's recent notes. "He must have managed to find them," she said, studying the papers. Your grandfather left a substantial fund in kind, Wheeler informed her. Part of it earmarked, specifically for solving this historical issue, if you choose to go that route. The sisters spent the next few hours exploring each vehicle mentioned in the video, discovering the secrets carefully preserved by Jackson. Marie's diary revealed a woman ahead of her time fighting against prejudice and social conventions. The letters in the various cars painted an intimate portrait of generations of the Grant family, with their struggles, loves, and moral dilemmas. It's like each car is a time capsule, Rachel observed, leafing through her grandmother's diary. Grandpa wasn't just collecting vehicles, he was preserving our history. Emma, who was examining the Pontiac GTO's impeccable engine, nodded. And now I understand why he entrusted it to us. It's not just about keeping the cars running or deciding which ones to sell. It's about honoring these stories and maybe correcting some of the mistakes of the past. As the sun set beyond the Virginia hills, casting long shadows through the barn's windows, the Grant sisters began to understand that they had inherited much more than a collection of classic cars. They had in their hands the chance to continue their grandfather's work, preserving not only historic vehicles but also the stories, secrets, and values that made the Grants who they were. I think I know where we should start, said Emma, holding up the documents about the ancestral lands. Rachel nodded in agreement, and they both knew their journey was just beginning. The morning arrived with an unexpected discovery. Emma was examining the interior of the 1959 Cadillac Eldorado when her fingers found a small lever hidden under the dashboard. With a soft click, a secret compartment opened, revealing an antique metal box. "Rachel," she called, her voice echoing through the barn. "Come and see this." Inside the box they found sepia photographs and a set of yellowed letters addressed to Dear Marie. The handwriting was different from her grandfather's, more elaborate and old. "These are from great-grandfather Theodore," said Rachel, examining the signature. "Written during the Second World War." The sisters sat on the hood of the Cadillac, soaking in the words that told a different story from the one they knew. Theodore Grant had not died in combat, as they had always believed. The letters revealed that he had survived the war, but had chosen not to return to protect his family from a dark secret. Frank Morrison appeared at the entrance to the barn carrying a toolbox. "You found the letters, didn't you?" he asked, his expression serious. "Jackson told me about them weeks before he died. He said the time would come for you to know the truth." Emma carefully put the letters away. "Frank, how much do you really know about our family history?" The caretaker sighed, leaning on the red Thunderbird. "Your grandfather trusted me with a lot of things over the years. Theodore Grant was investigating a group of corrupt officials who were embezzling funds intended for the troops. When he discovered the truth, he had to choose between returning home and putting his family at risk or disappearing." "But why keep it a secret for so long?" asked Rachel. "Because some of those men or their descendants still have influence in Millbrook," replied Frank. "Jackson discovered this when he started researching the history of the native lands. The implications of this revelation hit the sisters like a weight. Their grandfather's quest for justice regarding Native American lands and the mystery surrounding their great-grandfather seemed to be connected in some way. Emma picked up her phone and called Martin Wheeler. "We need to see all the documents relating to the original purchase of the farm," she said. "Even the ones that weren't in the safe." While they waited for Wheeler to arrive, the sisters continued exploring the vehicles. In the glove compartment of the Plymouth Barracuda they found an old map of the estate with mysterious markings. "Look at this," said Emma, pointing to an X drawn in a remote area of the farm. "It's dated 1943. Rachel compared the map with a current version on her tablet. "That area is now covered by forest, but it looks like there was a structure there." Frank, who was looking over their shoulders, frowned. "I never knew of any construction on that part of the property." Wheeler arrived with a thick folder of documents. After hours of going through old record certificates and contracts, a pattern began to emerge. Great-grandfather Theodore had bought additional parcels of land before leaving for the war, all adjacent to the area marked on the map. "He was protecting something," murmured Emma, connecting the dots. "Something to do with both the native lands and the corrupt officials." "We need to investigate that area," decided Rachel. "But first we have to make sure no one finds out what we're doing." Wheeler snorted, adjusting his glasses. "I should remind you that some of the families mentioned in these documents are still very influential in the region. We need to proceed with caution." Emma ran her hand over the polished hood of the Pontiac GTO. "Grandpa didn't keep this collection just for the historical value of the cars. Each vehicle is a piece of a larger puzzle. And now it's our responsibility to solve this mystery," Rachel added. The sisters decided to divide up the tasks. Rachel would use her contacts in the business world to discreetly investigate the families mentioned in the documents, while Emma and Frank would explore the area marked on the map. "There's one more thing," said Frank, going to a cupboard at the back of the barn. "Jackson used this to document everything he discovered. The film is still inside, it's never been developed." Wheeler offered to take the camera to a specialist in restoring old photographs in Richmond. "I have a trusted friend who can process the film discreetly." As the sun began to set, Emma and Rachel organized the documents and evidence they had discovered. The mystery surrounding their family was deeper and more complex than they had ever imagined. "You know what's most amazing?" said Rachel, looking at the collection of cars. "How Grandpa managed to turn each vehicle into a vault of secrets, hiding the truth in plain sight for all these years." Emma nodded, her mind already planning the exploration of the area marked on the map, and each discovery leads to more questions. Why did great-grandfather Theodore choose that particular spot? What was he protecting? And more importantly, added Wheeler, who else knows about this and might want to stop you from discovering the truth? The lawyer said goodbye, promising to return the next day with more information about the families involved. Frank went to check the barn security system, leaving the sisters alone with their thoughts. "Do you think we're ready for this?" asked Rachel, her voice betraying a hint of concern. Emma glanced at the portrait of her grandfather hanging on the wall of the barn office. "Grandpa trusted us for a reason. It's not just about preserving old cars or righting past wrongs. It's about completing the work that he and great-grandfather Theodore started." The shadows stretched across the barn, dancing over the classic shapes of the cars. Each vehicle, a time capsule holding secrets from the past, was patiently waiting for the moment to reveal its stories. And the Grant sisters were just beginning to unravel the mysteries that their grandfather had protected for so long. Dawn had not yet broken when Emma and Frank began their expedition to the area marked on the map. Equipped with flashlights, GPS, and basic digging tools, they made their way through the dense vegetation that now covered the spot where decades ago there had been some kind of structure. "Your grandfather never mentioned anything about this. Part of the property?" asked Emma, pushing a low branch out of the way. Frank shook his head. "Jackson avoided that area. Now I understand why. Look over there." Through the vegetation, the remains of a concrete foundation emerged, almost completely covered in moss and vines. Emma consulted the old map, confirming the location. "It seems to have been some kind of shed," she observed, examining the remains of the structure. "Too small to be a barn." Meanwhile, in town, Rachel was meeting with Martin Wheeler in a discreet coffee shop on the outskirts of Millbrook. The lawyer had brought information about the families mentioned in the documents. "The Caldwells still control much of the local business," Wheeler explained, sliding a file across the table. "Marcus Caldwell, the current patriarch, is the grandson of one of the officers investigated by Theodore." Rachel studied the photos and newspaper clippings. "And do they know about our investigation?" "Not yet, but—" Wheeler hesitated. "I got an interesting call last night. Marcus wants to buy the Grant farm. He's offered way above market value." Back in the forest, Emma and Frank made an intriguing discovery. Under a pile of rubble, they found a rusted metal door leading to a basement. "We need proper equipment to open this safely," said Frank, examining the rusty mechanism. Emma photographed the door and sent the images to Rachel, who replied immediately with a worrying message, "Don't do anything until I get there. We've got company." Minutes later, the sound of an approaching vehicle made Emma and Frank hide among the trees. A black SUV parked on the dirt road nearby, and Marcus Caldwell got out accompanied by two men. "I'm sure it was this way," said one of the men, consulting an electronic device. "Their GPS signal led to this area." Emma felt her heart race. They had tracked her phone. Frank signaled for them to retreat silently, but a broken branch under their feet alerted the intruders. "There's someone over there," shouted one of the men. "Run," whispered Frank. They split up, Emma heading west while Frank tried to draw the pursuers' attention to the opposite side. She managed to reach a nearby ravine where Rachel was waiting for her with the farm jeep. "How did you know?" asked Emma, panting as she threw herself into the passenger seat. "Wheeler found out that the Caldwells have been monitoring our communications," explained Rachel, speeding down the dirt road. "Frank will be fine. He knows this land better than anyone." Back at the barn, the sisters found Wheeler waiting with urgent news. The film from the old camera had been developed, showing surprising photographs. "These are records of secret meetings," Wheeler explained, spreading the photos out on the table. Theodore documented meetings between corrupt officials and local leaders, including Marcus Caldwell's grandfather. "And there's more," he continued, showing a yellowed document. "I found this in the state archives. The area where you were today, it was a meeting point for smuggling during the war. Officers diverted military supplies and sold them on the black market. That's why great-grandfather Theodore bought that land," Emma concluded. "He was protecting the evidence." Rachel looked at the photos again. "But why didn't Grandpa Jackson use that evidence?" "Because the corruption didn't stop with the end of the war," replied Frank, entering the barn. "He was dirty and scratched, but unharmed. The Caldwells built their empire on those secrets. Jackson knew he had to wait for the right moment. And now they want to silence the truth by buying the farm," said Rachel. Emma turned her attention to the Cadillac Eldorado. There must be more clues in the cars. Grandpa wouldn't keep all the evidence in one place. Over the next few hours, they methodically examined each vehicle in the collection, discovering new secret compartments. In the Thunderbird, they found geographical coordinates. In the Barracuda, a ledger detailing suspicious transactions stretching back to the present day. The Caldwells are still involved in illegal business, Wheeler realized looking at the most recent records. Jackson was building a case against them. "And now that responsibility is ours," said Emma, determined. Rachel agreed, but her expression was worried. "We need to be smarter than them. We can't just expose everything at once." "I have an idea," said Frank after a moment's thought. "Why don't we use the car collection itself as cover?" Wheeler leaned in interestedly. "Go on." "We advertise an auction," Frank explained. "It would attract legitimate attention to the property, making it difficult for the Caldwells to make any suspicious moves. And it would give us time to organize all the evidence," Emma added. "But we need to make sure that the cellar in the woods remains secure," Rachel reminded him. "There must be something important down there, or they wouldn't be so interested." Wheeler checked his watch. "I have some contacts in the FBI who can help us discreetly. But we need to act fast." The sisters exchanged determined glances. Their grandfather's legacy was greater than they had ever imagined, and now they understood why he had entrusted them not only with the car collection, but with all the truth it protected. "Tomorrow we start preparations for the auction," decided Emma. "And tonight," Rachel added, "we'll go back to the basement, with the right equipment this time." The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows through the barn windows. The classic cars, silent witnesses to decades of secrets, awaited the next chapter in their story. And the Grant sisters were determined to honor their family's legacy no matter the cost. The high-tech basement investigation equipment arrived disguised in an auto parts delivery van. Emma and Rachel watched as Frank and two experts in underground structures, discreetly hired by Wheeler, unloaded the instruments. "We've got about 4 hours until dawn," said Rachel, checking her watch. "The Caldwells are probably monitoring the property during the day." The The rusted metal door gave way after 40 minutes of painstaking work. The stagnant air that escaped carried decades of secrets. The beams of the flashlights revealed a steep staircase that descended deep into the earth. "We've detected safe oxygen levels," reported one of the specialists consulting a portable meter. "But proceed with caution. The structure is old." Emma went down, first followed by Rachel. The basement was surprisingly spacious, with several interconnected rooms. In the first, they found shelves with boxes of documents, organized chronologically, covering a period from 1941 to 1945. "Look at this," Rachel called out, opening one of the boxes. "Detailed records of all the military supply detour operations. Names, dates, amounts." "Theodore documented everything," murmured Emma, examining photographs that showed secret meetings at different locations in Millbrook. "But there's something more here. Something that goes beyond corruption during the war." In the next room they discovered a complete archive on the native lands. Old maps showed sacred sites that had been deliberately omitted from official records when the property was transferred. "The Caldwells didn't just want the military supplies," said Frank, studying the documents. "They discovered that there was gold in the native lands. The corruption scheme was just the beginning." A metallic noise upstairs made everyone freeze. Footsteps echoed above. "Turn off the flashlights," whispered Rachel. In the absolute dark, they heard voices approaching the basement entrance. Emma recognized Marcus Caldwell's voice. "It's got to be down here," he said. "My grandfather always suspected that Theodore kept the evidence somewhere on the property." Rachel squeezed Emma's arm silently, guiding her to a side door they had noticed earlier. Frank and the experts followed. The door led to a narrow tunnel. "Emergency exit," muttered Frank. "Your grandfather mentioned that Theodore had built escape routes into various structures on the property." As they moved down the passage, they could hear Caldwell's men searching the basement. Emma was carrying a briefcase that she had instinctively grabbed before fleeing. The tunnel emerged almost half a kilometer away next to the stream that ran through the property. As soon as they reached the surface, Rachel activated a device on her phone. "Security cameras installed yesterday," she explained. "They're transmitting everything the Caldwells are doing down there directly to Wheeler." Back in the barn, protected by the reinforced security system, they examined the contents of the briefcase Emma had retrieved. They were bank records, linking the Caldwell family to a series of shell companies used to launder money obtained illegally over decades. "Not only did they continue their illegal operations after the war," said Emma, "but they expanded into other sectors. Construction, mining, real estate development. All built on stolen land and dirty money," Rachel added. Wheeler rushed in carrying more documents. "The FBI is interested," he said. "But we need more concrete proof that the illegal operations have continued to the present day." Emma headed for the Packard Caribbean, one of the cars they hadn't yet fully examined. After a thorough search, she found a hidden compartment in the trunk containing an old laptop. "It was Grandpa's," she said, turning it on. "Password protected." Rachel smiled. "Try Marie 1959, the date of their wedding." The computer unlocked, revealing years of meticulous research by Jackson Grant. He had continued Theodore's work documenting the Caldwells' every suspicious move through the decades. "Grandpa knew he couldn't take them on alone," said Rachel. "That's why he prepared all this for us. He knew we'd need irrefutable proof." Frank, who was monitoring the security cameras, warned, "Caldwell and his men are leaving the basement. They look frustrated." "They didn't find what they were looking for," said Emma. "But we did." Wheeler quickly examined the files. On the laptop. "This is pure dynamite. We have evidence of tax evasion, bribery of public officials, falsification of documents. All perfectly documented. And now I understand why Grandpa was so insistent on the car collection," said Rachel. "It wasn't just a facade to hide the evidence. Each vehicle tells a part of the story preserved through generations." Emma nodded. "The question is, how do we use it without putting everything at risk? The Caldwells are still powerful. They have connections. "Maybe," said Wheeler. "It's time to count on unexpected allies." He slid a business card across the table. It was from Catherine Running Bear, a lawyer specializing in indigenous rights, and granddaughter of the tribal chief whose land had been taken. Jackson kept in touch with her family for years, Wheeler explained. He was waiting for the right moment to bring justice. The sisters exchanged determined glances. The truth that their grandfather had protected for so long was about to come out, but they had to be strategic. One false move could jeopardize everything. "Tomorrow I start the process of publicizing the auction," said Rachel. "The more public attention we get, the harder it will be for the Caldwells to act in the shadows." Emma looked at the collection of cars, each one holding its own piece of history. "And in the meantime, we need to make sure all the evidence is safe. We can't let Grandpa down, or Theodore." The night wore on, and with it grew the certainty that they were about to unravel a mystery that had shaped not only their family, but the entire history of Millbrook. The truth, as his grandfather had always known, had the power to change everything. The day of the auction dawned with an electric energy in the air. The Red Barn, now transformed into an elegant showroom, was packed with collectors, experts, and the curious who had come from all over the country to see the legendary Grant collection. Emma watched the crowd from the mezzanine, noticing the presence of Marcus Caldwell and his associates near the entrance. Rachel, impeccable, in a navy blue suit, led potential buyers through the history of each vehicle, carefully omitting the secrets they held. "Catherine Running Bear has arrived," whispered Wheeler, approaching Emma. The Indian lawyer, an imposing woman in her 50s, was accompanied by 2 undercover federal agents. The plan was in motion. While the auction served as a public distraction, an operation coordinated by the FBI was unfolding behind the scenes. The evidence collected by Theodore and Jackson Grant, combined with the documentation gathered by Catherine about the ancestral lands, had provided the basis for a full federal investigation. "The documents from the basement have all been scanned and sent to secure locations," Frank confirmed, joining them. "Even if the Caldwells try something, they can't bury the truth any longer." Emma went downstairs to join her sister as the official auction began. The first lot included vehicles that the sisters had decided to sell, those that contained no crucial evidence or special family significance. Marcus Caldwell took an active part in the bidding, acquiring 3 cars for well above market prices. His apparently normal behavior was exactly what they expected. "He thinks he's still in control of the situation," Rachel muttered to Emma during a pause. "He doesn't know that every transaction is being monitored by the FBI." The crucial moment came when the Pontiac GTO was announced. Emma knew that in the secret compartment of the car was one last surprise left by Jackson, a USB stick containing recordings of recent Caldwell meetings discussing illegal operations. Marcus made the highest bid, a satisfied smile on his face. But before the hammer could fall, Catherine Running Bear raised her sign. $2 million, she announced, her voice clear and firm. Caldwell's smile faltered. He couldn't let the car go into other hands, but he couldn't look too desperate either. After an intense bidding battle, Catherine emerged victorious. It was at that moment that everything changed. The barn doors opened, and federal agents began to identify themselves. Marcus Caldwell and his associates were quietly detained, while the rest of the auction participants watched in confusion. Marcus Caldwell announced, the special agent in charge, "You are under arrest for tax fraud, extortion, and conspiracy." Emma and Rachel watched the scene unfold, feeling the weight of generations of secrets finally being lifted from their shoulders. Catherine approached them, holding out an envelope. "Your grandfather and I worked on this for years," she said, handing over the document. "It's a restitution agreement. Part of the land will be returned to the tribe, but the Grant farm will remain with you along with a joint historic preservation program." The sisters scrutinized the agreement, seeing how Jackson had meticulously planned a resolution that would benefit all parties involved, except, of course, the Caldwells. In the weeks that followed, the story dominated local and even national headlines. The fall of the Caldwell Empire revealed decades of corruption that had shaped Millbrook. Old records were reopened, properties redistributed, and the truth about the native lands finally came to light. Emma and Rachel kept the most significant cars from the collection, transforming the barn into a museum that told not only the story of the classic vehicles, but also the journey of their family and the town. "Grandpa always knew we needed more than just evidence," said Emma as they organized the inaugural exhibition. "We needed the full story told through these cars so that no one could deny it. And now we can add our own chapter," Rachel added, hanging a recent photograph next to Jackson's portrait. In it, the sisters appeared with Catherine and members of the tribe celebrating the signing of the restitution agreement. Frank, who had become the museum's official curator, smiled when he saw the final result. Jackson would have been proud, not just for exposing the truth, but for finding a way to turn it into something positive for the community. The sun was setting over Millbrook, its golden light streaming through the barn windows and dancing across the polished paintwork of the historic cars. Each vehicle now told two stories, one of its own era and one of the role it played in the quest for justice. "Do you know what impresses me the most?" said Rachel, watching a group of visitors examine the Cadillac Eldorado. "How Grandpa turned each car into a time capsule, preserving not only history, but the hope that one day the truth would come out." Emma nodded, her gaze roaming over the collection that now represented much more than monetary or historical value. It was a testament to perseverance, courage, and the unshakable belief that the truth, when protected and nurtured through the generations, always finds its way to the light. "The real legacy was never the cars," she concluded. "It was the courage to do the right thing no matter how long it takes." And so the Red Barn at Grant Farm stood as a symbol of transformation and redemption, its doors open to all who wanted to learn about the power of truth and the importance of preserving the stories that shape our communities.